This episode of Capes and Lunatics is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. Get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com. All right, everyone. Welcome to, we've been doing this monthly miniseries, Who is Captain Marvel? We've been going through all the Captain Marvels. We started with Marvel. We went to Monica Rambeau. Then we got to Genus Vell. So now we're at Carol Danvers, current Captain Marvel. She's going to have her own movie. And just this week, new series, Captain Marvel #1. Me, Will, and Matt are honored to have Miss Kelly Thompson, the busiest woman in comics right now, it seems like.
Definitely feels like that. I mean, I'm sure everyone's very busy, but I don't know how people do this long term. I'm pretty tired.
I'm sure it's hectic, especially now with everything I've seen online. Just the last day or so, everything's been positive about Captain Marvel. I mean, I know I loved it, but...
Thanks. It's been awesome. I mean, I think that, unfortunately, social media being the way it is, you have to cultivate your feed a little bit. I don't want to live in a bubble that's only positive, but unfortunately, a lot of the critical stuff doesn't come sort of in a reasonable way. It comes... It's like a lot of hate, and so, I mean, I have hundreds of accounts muted now because, so it would be hard for me to know if people hated it. I'm sure there are plenty of people that do hate it, but yeah, my feed has been incredibly positive. The reviews have been great. It's been really exciting. People seem very happy. So it's been really nice. Bubbles are the best, I guess. I don't know.
But I've been all over Twitter and everything else, all the websites, and I haven't seen anything negative yet. So it's great. I love this. But before we jump into the actual book, were you have you been a fan of Carol for a while, or?
I'm a huge fan of Carol. My first book at Marvel was a co-write during Secret Wars, Captain Marvel and the Carol Corps.
Yes. So
it's sort of cool to get to come back to the character after. I mean, it's sort of like it's a completely new thing, but it also sort of feels like coming home again. It's a little weird. I also got to write her in A-Force, of course, but that was in a much more sort of ensemble capacity. I mean, there was actually a concerted effort in that book to sort of make sure she wasn't the leader, just because we had so many characters and she already had sort of a lot of stuff going on. So, excuse me. But it was sort of fun to write her that way, and I actually think it gave me some interesting context for her as a different kind of character, because she was very much the leader in Captain Marvel and the Carol Corps, and she is now in this too. But in A-Force, she was sort of deliberately taking a step back. So it gave me some interesting ways to get to write her before I got to this, and she's incredible. And it's just an incredible opportunity. I mean, the timing, the character is poised to become, more well-known than ever before and hopefully inspire, a lot of people, but especially younger people, younger women. And so that feels like a really big responsibility, and I feel really honored that they'd give it to me.
Well, I mean, the tagline from the comics, higher, farther, faster. I mean, that's movie now. I mean, that's gonna expand way beyond anything that almost any writer besides, say, Stephen King will be able to influence. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty incredible and totally deserving. I mean, that is that worked so well. It's so quintessential Carol in the comics, but it's also just such a great call to arms for the kind of hero that Carol is, and the sort of feminism intrinsic in a big, first big Marvel female character movie for the company. It's awesome. Hopefully Boss of Space is on the issue. That's just as good, right? No, not at all. That's a joke. It's not at all as good. It's like most things I do, it's more of a joke than emotionally resonant. But, we all do what we can.
But I mean, I love you hit the right formula with me with this, because like I like the space stuff, but like with any of these characters, even like with Thor and Asgard and stuff, like I like it when they split their time. I don't like them to be in space the whole time. I like when you bring I like half the time in space, but I want that time back on Earth where they're punching villains in the face, which you gave us that too. This is the issue.
Sorry.
Now I'm a little. Yeah. Kelly, I was wondering, what about the timeline of when you started writing for this new incarnation, like the new Captain Marvel and the movie? Are you in contact at all with the film people? Is there...
No. The short answer is no. So, I mean, I feel like, and I think Marvel would probably agree, but it's my opinion, let's stick with that, that you can't really as much as you'd like to tie yourself really tightly to the film, you can't really do that because comics are supposed to be leading those stories, right? We're supposed to be the inspiration that they take from. We're supposed to be the place where all these ideas first get tried out and, and become amazing. And then they can say, oh yeah, that's great. What can we adapt that, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? So I think the comics have to lead. It's funny, it seems backwards because films are obviously such a bigger business, but I think it's really important that comics sort of lead when you come to the narratives. There's also just an impracticality to the idea that you would follow the films. I mean, they're just their own thing and they have their own life to them. I was very happy to see that when those first trailers came out, that we were very in line with some of the ideas that it feels like the trailers are about. But that's not that surprising. I mean, Marvel is, the MCU is going to great lengths to do a great Captain Marvel movie. And so, of course, they're drawing from what comes from the comics before, and I'm drawing for my stories on what comes from the comics before. So it's not that surprising that a 2019 Captain Marvel in the film looks similar to a 2019 Captain Marvel in the comics. Like, it's just sort of her evolution. I did, after I saw the first trailer, I did end up tweaking or sort of modifying some of my dialogue in the dialogue pass because we had time to do that. And really just sort of not changing, but sort of emphasizing some of the stuff that I thought was that was similar in our book and in the feeling of the trailer. Notably the always getting back up stuff on the second and third page. That was there, but it wasn't sort of emphasized the same way, I guess I'd say.
Cool.
Very interesting.
But yes, and well, since the comics are leading, I'll throw this in because I can do another thing. But since you're writing so many books, are we going to get any crossovers between the Thompson verse? There, I coined it, the Thompson verse. Are we going to get like a Captain Marvel West Coast Avengers crossover? Or?
I mean, I love that stuff. I'd love to do that. I think I'd love to do. There's part of me that really wants to get Kate Bishop and Carol together, just because I love them so much, and they're very different to me, very different characters. Excuse me, but I don't know how much that's in the cards for that. I mean, I think more what I like to do is to shove characters that I'm interested in into things in sort of guest appearances and stuff, rather than trying to coordinate a crossover, like read this book or read that book. Like Carol definitely shows up a little bit in the new Jessica Jones series that starts next week. I think she's in the first issue. And, Emma, I was writing Uncanny X-Men and didn't get to write Emma Frost, much to my chagrin. So she's also showing up in the Jessica Jones season 2. I found a way to jam Elsa Bloodstone in Jessica Jones season 1. I found a way to jam Jessica Jones and Kate Bishop's Hawkeye, so I like to find ways that those characters sort of naturally cross over and interact, for a variety of reasons, but I wouldn't expect a big crossover anytime soon, no.
Okay. Yeah, because I know also we were hoping for a Superior Spider-Man appearance in West Coast Avengers, too.
I think that might happen, maybe not in West Coast Avengers, but related to War of Realms stuff and something. I think you might see some of those characters interact. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to see Superior Spider-Man and Quentin Quire going at it. Yeah.
I can't promise anything, but I could see that happening. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, do you have a short list of characters that you like or were fans of as a reader that you would like to put into anything you did in the future? Not to spoil anything, but
yeah. I mean. Yeah, I always have a list of characters that I'm really interested in, but more than that, I like to, I like to integrate characters that I'm interested in that I think bring something really interesting to the narrative. So, I think the first real example of that of me doing that really well was when we had Jessica Jones show up for that second arc of Hawkeye. And, it was sort of like we used this device of Kate trying to learn from a mentor, but sort of taking the lessons in her own way that maybe weren't exactly the way Jessica would actually say she was imparting them. And that was just sort of magical how that all worked out. Obviously, bringing Clint into Hawkeye was a big deal, and that was sort of, I loved that together. I think that one of the most interesting examples, and I hope that the Emma Frost one pans out this similar way, was I really had to fight to put Elsa Bloodstone in the Jessica Jones book, by editor Alana, who's wonderful, and I love her. Hi, Alana. She was like, I don't really see how Jessica Jones or how Elsa Bloodstone really fits in this sort of ground level Jessica Jones book. And I was like, that's the point. I want to shove her in there and see what does Elsa Bloodstone look like in this noir, more realistic noir street level setting? And by the same token, how does Jessica react to a character that is chopping the heads off of sea monsters when Jessica really does more ground level stuff? And I don't know, I'm obviously incredibly biased, but I thought it was amazing.
Well, a quick question for you. You've jumped around. I mean, you talked noir. We get sci-fi type stuff in Captain Marvel. If you look at West Coast Avengers, it's more superhero-y stuff. I mean, is there one genre you like to play in more than any other, or is it just kind of, hey, there's something about every one of them that appeals to you?
I mean, I think I like things about each of them, and even though I seem to be pigeonholing myself in certain ways, cough, female characters, cough, I like that I'm doing all these totally different, one is an action comedy romance, one is a superhero comedy with a documentary style reality show thing in it, one is a hard-boiled, mature noir, Carol is a super traditional superhero book, So I love that I'm getting to explore all of those things. I think it's helping me become a better writer because it forces me to look at what I do well and what I don't do so well and figure that out. I think if I have to pick a favorite genre, it's probably, I always lean toward noir detective stuff. I love that stuff. But, I obviously also really love superheroes. I mean, I work in comics, for Christ's sake. So. But yeah, genre detective stuff is some of my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like you're very extremely busy, but at least if you're not doing just one genre, you can't get bored.
Yeah,
you can always jump to something else.
Yeah. I would say there is there's a good bad side to that, which is, if you're in a really bad mood and you're not up for writing the, obvious superhero hijink comedy of West Coast Avengers, like maybe you can pivot to Jessica Jones. At the same time, it does create a problem where, sometimes you're really in the mood for something else, but hey, that's the script that's due tomorrow, so you better keep your head in noir,
Mm-hmm.
So it can be tempting to pivot away, I guess, is what I mean.
I was going to ask you if you're very structured, if you have a schedule, or is it just like, okay, whatever one is due first, that's the one I'm going to work on today. And
yeah, unfortunately, my schedule's so intense right now, it's basically driven by what's the one that the editor is banging down my door for yesterday. That's the one I have to be finishing. So,
and do you find it easy? Is it just different, or like on an Uncanny X-Men, you're a co-writer? So is it how do I want to say? I don't want to say is it easier, is it harder, but like how does the process differ from like when you're the single writer on a book?
I think Uncanny X-Men is a great example of that. Ended up being surprisingly easy to write because once we had an outline, because it's a big event and it was going to happen fast, we had to have a really clear outline early on. And so that made it easy to turn in pages. And then even though you were, you had a lot of deadlines because it was weekly, you were only writing pages in 6 or 7, and then in the case of the first issue and the last issue, 10-page and 20-page chunks. So it was a lot easier. So the writing process itself wasn't too bad, but I will say everything else about it is really hard. You don't have control of the narrative. You don't have control of the quality content, which is no diss on my fellow writers who are 2 of my best friends in comics and 2 writers who I really respect and like. But for me, the hardest thing was, you want to be a collaborator in there. You don't want to sort of, I don't know. I didn't want to come in and start throwing my weight around and taking control of things. And I think they probably didn't either. I didn't talk to them directly about it. They probably didn't either. But as a result, I think the quality control that I'm used to in things that I write on my own is lacking. It doesn't mean I don't think the book's good. It doesn't mean I'm not proud of, some of the stuff we've done. It just means it was hard to let go. And it was hard to be like, okay, well, that's how we did that. And I'm not going to try to overrun anybody to fix that, So it's tricky. It's definitely a learned skill. This was the first time I've ever co-written a series with someone where I was sort of on equal footing, because when I did Captain Marvel with Kelly Thompson, I was brand new and she was a superstar. So that's a totally different dynamic. She's running that show. And it's easy to be like, I'm going to do everything I can to be the best possible collaborator, but I also know I'm not in charge. And A-Force was totally different because while that would have been the same dynamic with G. Willow Wilson, the truth is because of, her family commitments and health stuff that was going on, she basically had to step out. And so she handed off a plot and then I was just in charge at that point, and she gets credit for that co-write because she did the plotting, but I wasn't coordinating with anyone because she had to step aside. And so that would have been more similar to the Kelly Sue DeComet dynamic, I think. But instead, it ended up mostly being me just doing it myself, just working off of someone else's work. Whereas this was a really equal split. Like, everyone had sort of an equal voice in the room, and I like that about it, but I do think things suffered as a result of everyone sort of wanting to get along and no one sort of wanting to be the guy that said, I don't like this, or I think we're going on a wrong path here, or whatever. So it's the fine art, man.
And follow up real quick. We've talked about how busy you are. What's a typical day look like for you?
That's a hard question to answer now because I've had about 12 hours of sleep in 4 days.
Yeah. And with the amount of titles that you're working on, and I don't know if the word "typical" exists, but I'm curious. But I am curious, what an ideal day would be if you could set aside a day to work and create. How would it be set up?
Sure. An ideal day is I get up between 8 and 9. As long as my cat will let me sleep in, I would try to stay in bed, usually between 7 and 8 instead. So I would get up and feed the cats and make some breakfast and then just get started. And I would work all day, basically. If I know I'm going to be up late, I might take a 90-minute nap at one point. And, it's just working all day. And then usually a break in the evening, maybe have some dinner and hang out and watch some shows with my boyfriend or go to the movies or, something that's a break. And then usually getting back to it at night. My schedule right now, because I was so sick and then I hurt my back, it's been completely out of whack and I'm really behind on all my work. And so it's been just I went to bed today I was trying to go to bed at 9:15 a.m. But I was so tired after I turned in my script that I stayed up all night on that I just fell asleep on the couch and I woke up at 9:30 or at 10:30 and was completely disoriented. I got up and brushed my teeth and went to bed and I slept till 2 and then I got up and started working again because I had a conference call at 3 and then I had this later. So It's chaos. But I got the script in, so that's I don't know.
So you were working like crazy on the day that Captain Marvel #1 came out, pretty much. So the day that you should have been out, like celebrate. I don't know. There's not like a big premiere on comic day. Like there could be,
I think the only celebration is I was really watching what people were saying, and I was reading nice reviews, and I was very engaged on social media, which it's not that fun, but I was not that effective at my job on Wednesday as a result. So it's a mixed bag. I'm certainly happy, though. If I had champagne in the fridge, if I hadn't had a million scripts to turn in, maybe I would have had some to drink. But maybe Friday night.
Yeah,
delayed celebration.
And have you been asked for a lot of interviews and a lot of press stuff because Carol is big in the public eye right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've got a lot of requests, but whether it's because I knew I was busy and so I was pushing them off, or just maybe because of the holidays, people weren't on it. Most of the interviews and podcast requests and stuff are coming for later this month instead of like in the last week or two. Again, it's hard for me to know whether that was just me pushing stuff because I knew I was so crowded. But yeah, it's been a really great response. It's been really nice.
Well, is there a light at the end of your tunnel? I mean, you're going to be able to ease off a little bit maybe in a week, month, year, decade?
By the end of January, unless things go catastrophically wrong, by the end of January, things should really lighten a lot. Just of having gotten caught up and things that are changing and,
When Uncanny's not weekly.
Yeah, I mean, Uncanny is definitely a load off, for sure.
So what do you want to see in the Captain Marvel movie? Like, what do you what's the one thing you want in that movie?
I think she already said it, isn't it? Boss of Space.
yeah, that's what I want. They put that in a video game, and I was like, yes, I've arrived, and now there's a movie, and I'm like, now I want more. No.
That's going to be in the Avengers movie. Tony Stark's going to be like, who are you, the boss of space?
Yeah. I just want it to be good, man. I mean, I think, there's a lot of pressure on it because of what it is and when it's happening and everything. It's also funny because my favorite MCU movies, like, I feel like you can draw a line between them about what it is I respond to in them, but tonally, I think people would say they're completely different, which is my two favorites are Captain America, Winter Soldier, which is a very serious one, right? Yeah. Almost perfect action movie, really. And Thor Ragnarok, which I think is hilarious and weird, and just, it lets it be okay. It's possible part of what I respond to in those two things are the insane hotness and likability of those two Chris's. I mean, that's a thing. But I just really, those are my two favorites. So to me, there's a whole range of ways in which you can make those really great Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. I mean, I think a lot of people loved Infinity War. I think someone like me who knows what they know about comics, Infinity War has an uphill battle because I know the snap's coming. I know what the snap can mean. I know what the snap doesn't mean. And so I don't have those sort of built-in kind of, oh my God, that a regular audience member has. Mm-hmm. What I do have is a total appreciation for, to me, Infinity War, it was like they were like, how do we make a Mad Max Fury Road Marvel movie? Because if you look at that movie, it's really just action scenes, and it's, instead of being the typical action movie that we're used to seeing, which is not a bad format. There's always like 1 to 1.5 too many action scenes, right? And we're like, all right, did we really need this one? But here's this movie and they're peppered by these action scenes at these points. But for Infinity War, they really reversed that. They were like, no, it's action all the time, and we'll insert these little scenes in between it that are the connective tissue. And that is a huge risk that not a lot of movies could pull off. And I feel like they completely did it. They built the stake, the way everything edges up to that final battle is so sort of flawless. We've all been, it was also a really great example of, because some of the movies have really, like Captain America Civil War, really felt like a downgrade from Winter Soldier just because there were so many characters and it sort of tipped over on itself, even though that scene in the airport hangar and outside the airport is so great and so fun.
Oh, yeah, Civil War, yeah.
As a story, it was really difficult because no one's getting enough stuff. And I was so worried going into Infinity War. I was like, it's never going to work. There's too many freaking characters. But they've built the universe so well that we've seen all these movies and all these connections have actually ended up happening really organically. And they nailed it. And I was shocked. And so I think that if only because they've done such an amazing job over the years, Captain Marvel has a lot to live up to. There are so many people that want it to be amazing and want it to succeed. And then there's plenty of people who want it to fail too. And I just want it to be good. But I have to say, everything I've seen in the previews has me really excited. I think, some of that action stuff with her going what looks like binary in space, so freaking cool. That those hard cuts of her getting up over and over again and the clenching fist is so good. And then they showed us that new preview where we got a little bit of a feel of the sense of humor and sort of the lightness and the dynamic between her and Fury. And that was all great. That was like exactly what I needed to see in that third trailer to get even more excited. So I just hope it's great. I don't care about anything else. I just want it to be great.
So here's a stupid question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the success of Wonder Woman took some pressure off or added more pressure to this movie?
Well, I'll never not be mad that Marvel didn't get there first, because there was no reason for them not to. Maybe they couldn't have gotten Captain Marvel there first, but we could have gotten Black Widow there first.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll never not be mad that didn't happen. But when you see Captain Marvel coming now, you wonder if there weren't some very smart people in a room going, you know what? Just let them go first. Like, let them test the waters and be the one. And we're just worried about making a good movie. We don't need to be the first one to the line. We need to make the best movie. Mm-hmm. And I respect that. And I think that there's a lot they can learn from Wonder Woman, good and bad. And I hope they did. I hope they looked at it and got those lessons.
I think even with all the space stuff, all the aliens, because, we're getting Skrulls in this movie, awesome. Mm-hmm. But I think even with all the space stuff, I think people are going to relate more to Carol than Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And I think the timing is just perfect because, this is an origin story and that's going to run right into Avengers Endgame, where I think she's going to be like one of the big heroes in this thing.
Yeah. I mean, they're certainly setting it up that way. And, I have faith.
So I know, Keith. I love also that you picked up on like past storylines, like you addressed her and Rhodey's relationship. Now that he's back from the dead and she's back on Earth, and
yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely talk of like, should we be doing a new relationship? And I was like, I don't know why we wouldn't revisit Rhodey. Like, Kelly Thompson started something really interesting there. They make a ton of sense as characters because, they not only share extreme hotness and their superhero backgrounds, and their experiences therein, but, they come from that military background that is not super relatable to every reader or to every fictional hero, right? That's not something that's like a one-for-one translation. I mean, I feel like Captain Marvel, Carol got sometimes a bad reputation in Civil War II and Civil War I. And, we all sort of wonder about that. I mean, the thing I came to, her position was very hard for me personally in Civil War II, but I was writing an arc with her for A-Force at the time, and I had to figure it out. And so I was sitting with the character a lot, and I was like, wait a minute, her position completely makes sense from a military standpoint because you're weighing bad options, right? Like, that's your job. Like, we're at war. What is the option that protects the most people, that has the least number of casualties? Like, as a military mind, she has to consider some of those Civil War II arguments and end up on in this case, I think the wrong side of things, but for the right reasons. And so I think with Carol and Rhodey, the military background is something interesting. It's gonna not, because they're now in this alternate situation. It's not an alternate reality, but I don't want to say exactly what it is because I don't want to spoil anything. But, she's away from him now for the rest of, until issue 5, basically. And, but she and Rhodey are definitely going to be a continued thing that we're developing. And it's the military aspect especially is going to be a thing that we're playing into for the arc 3, which is going to be starting with issue, why can't I count? Starting with issue 8, I think. Mm-hmm. I think it's great. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do with this book was not create a lot of new characters. I think comics creators, we always like to do that. It's fun for us, and you always hope a new character you create will hit, not just because maybe there's money in it, but because it's exciting to see people connect to something you've created. But especially because Carol has had sort of so many different creative teams and so many number ones, and we've brought a lot of new characters into her world. And so I thought, let's take her back to basics a little bit. Let's bring in, core characters that she's connected to, as well as some characters that already are out there and great and that have excellent fan bases, but that are underused, like Echo and Hazmat. Like, let's bring those guys in here, and Spider-Woman, of course, she's had her own book for the last few years and she's been in some cool events and stuff, but she's not in anything right now, and that's a shame. She's a great character. So rather than create a new something, I was like, I would rather bring in these other women and let's see how that goes. So it's a lot of sort of greatest hits characters in there, which I'm sort of excited about.
Well, speaking of bringing characters in, I mean, are you going to bring in your favorite? I know they have history, not all of it good. Are you going to bring Rogue in at some point?
Maybe.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that definitely might be a thing. And I think the solicits are out now, so She-Hulk's going to be involved in this arc as well. And it's not that I didn't create any new characters. There's a new character on the last page of the first issue that a lot of people think is Quentin Quire, but it is not. And when people were so excited, I was like, I'm sorry, guys. The funny thing is, his hair was even more like Quentin's before, and we all called it out. We're like, we got to change it. Everyone's going to think that's Quentin, but apparently we didn't go far enough. And then Ripley Ryan is a new character who is going to be through the first 5 issues, and then she's going to show up in later as well, in maybe a bigger role. So it's not like I didn't create anything new, but I was just thought the focus on classics might help us and be fun.
Quick question for you. Is there a point that you can, or a particular issue that you can point to, or is it more of a gradual thing that, this character really kind of became one of your favorites, in the past, from a fan standpoint, not essentially from a creator standpoint?
I think, more as a fan than a creator?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Rogue was early on, from first love at first sight kind of thing. He was, I saw her. My brother literally turned on the TV one Saturday morning. And it opened on Fox, and it opened on Rogue flying at the Sentinel in the mall and punching it in the face. And I was like, what? And that was it. I was in love. So, I mean, that's sort of the most obvious story and example. I think, but here's a weird one. I was never that big a fan of Cyclops. So I got into comics through the X-Men animated series. So I was reading a lot of those 90s comics, mid-90s, and then I was also reading all these back issues and stuff. And I liked Scott fine. I liked Cyclops fine. He's sort of douchey in the cartoon. And it's not even he's just such a stick in the mud, right? It's like, whose favorite character is Cyclops? Nobody. And I was enjoying him in the comics, and it was fine. And then I read, it was X-Men 44, which is when he's trapped in the Australian outback with the Acolytes after the Asteroid M stuff. And that was a great example of someone completely reversing me on a character, because it just showed his leadership qualities and what made him so amazing and so different than these Acolytes who basically would have died out there without Scott Summers leading them to civilization. And it was this great moment where I just totally turned around on a character, and I've really loved Cyclops ever since. And found him sort of fascinating. And it helps that a lot of creators have done cool stuff with him since then, but it's just a really clear moment in time where I switched direction on how I felt about a character. But I think that really goes to the need to keep an open mind as both a creator and a reader. I was, when Scott Snyder was first doing Batman, and it was going to be, or Detective Comics rather, and it was going to be Dick Grayson as Batman. And I was like, ugh, I'm out. I love Dick Grayson, but he's Nightwing. He's not Batman. Bruce Wayne is Batman, and that's it. And I was very, very sure of that. And Black Mirror turns out to be one of my favorite Batman stories of all time. It's fantastic. I love it. I fell in love with Dick Grayson as Batman, and it didn't hurt that the Batman and Robin with the Damian Wayne was happening at the same time, and that was brilliant too. And I was like, wait a minute, is Dick Grayson the better Batman? Like, what's happening? And, you know, it's just a great example of if you open your mind, what you might find, you know?
So is it, do you have to talk to, is it Jason Aaron writing Avengers right now, since Carol is big over there also?
We coordinate a little bit. I mean, Jason is literally the nicest guy ever. But mostly our coordination ends up happening through the editors. I think just to keep sanity. I'm sure Jason would be completely fine with me reaching out and like asking him some questions and stuff, but for the most part, it's just easier to, like, when you're pitching, like, I can't send Jason my pitch for a new arc and be like, hey, I know you're super busy, but, you know, just take your time out to, like, read this pitch. So instead you end up sending it to your editors who want it, and then they're like, this is great, but you can't do X, Y, and Z because, you know, Jason shaved her head or whatever, you know. So yeah.
I do like the longer hair back just because she doesn't have a cape, but just, you got to have something flowing with those flying characters, either a cape or hair, something.
I love Carol with the short hair. What I will concede to is that not every artist draws it equally. Like, some people could really make the long hair or the short hair work, and some people not so much.
Yes.
So I'm fine with us going back to the long hair. That said, I mean, obviously, as you guys can tell from the last page, I sort of undid it anyway, but it won't be so. And also, it looks so freaking cool. About it, it looks amazing.
So,
for this arc that starts sort of at the end of this issue, like, you know, as we launch into this new thing, everyone was really excited about it. Everyone liked the pitch. Everything was great. And then Carmen turned in the designs, and it was like everyone's enthusiasm went up like 1,000%. And I was like, I'll try not to be offended and just remember that pictures are better than words, you know? We showed some of that off at the summit in, I guess it was May, at the Marvel Summit. And people were enjoying the pitch. They were into it. They were like, oh, yeah, sounds cool, blah, blah, blah. And then we put up the designs. And people were like, oh, boy. And a couple people, Sana Ama and Stephen Wacker, came up to me in particular afterward. And they're like, can we make this story longer? And I was like, listen, like, I've been the ringer on this stuff. Maybe we can do something else with it if the fans love it, because I love it. But, you know, calm down. Things are already planned out, guys. You're going to kill Sarah and Will and me.
You kind of burst onto the scene with your novel. What was The Girl Who Would Be King, right?
That was my first big thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any plans in the future to go back to straight up prose, or are you just
yes and
loving
no.
comics? Yeah.
Yes and no. I've found it very difficult to shift between writing comics and writing prose. And, you know, I couldn't really put my finger on why. And I saw G. Willow Wilson talking about it, and she was just talking about how it's just such a different discipline. Like, you know, writing novels, and then you switch over to comics and you find yourself really overwriting the comics, right? Because we're in our head and we need to know about the smell in the air and no, you don't need to know about it. You know, it's something that informs a novel, but ends up feeling overwritten in a comic. And by the reverse, you know, sometimes you're like just writing dialogue. You're like, wait, is this a screenplay? Like, what am I doing to this poor novel suffering? So I've found the switch very difficult. I'm also just very busy. I mean, I'm working on a screenplay with a producer for The Girl Who Would Be King. Cool. If I my hope is that Story Killer Volume 2 or the sequel or Part 2 of the series is what it should be. I'm hoping that's going to happen this year, but I hoped it was going to happen last year too. So it's been a struggle.
And just the scheduling for like comics and like novels is different, right? Because comics is so much fast.
Yeah,
it happens so much faster. Yeah,
very fast. The other problem is, and this is sort of a deep cut, and you're maybe not interested in this, but part of the problem I have is that, when you're doing a Kickstarter, and that was fine when I was starting out and I didn't have a lot of comics work, if you do a Kickstarter, you're no longer a writer. You're a writer, you're an editor. Even if you hire an editor, you're still an editor. You're a publisher, you're a printer, you're a shipper. You're this whole thing. And I don't really have time for all that now. I maybe can find time to be a novelist and a comic book writer, but I don't think I have time for all the other stuff of running the Kickstarter. But the novel I really do want to work on, and I feel like my fans want, is part 2 of a book that started as a Kickstarter. So it's a little tricky trying to pitch that to an agent or a publisher. Like, I feel like my profile is raised enough. I might have more luck than I had when I was sort of a nobody in 2012. I might have more luck getting an agent or getting some interest in one of my novels, but it's very hard to get interest in the sequel to a book that was published 4 years ago. So they'd have to really buy Story Killer and buy the sequel and then republish the first one. And is there a way in which that can happen? Maybe. Would I need to be a lot more famous? Probably. So it's tricky. But I'm also loath, as much as I'd like to go off and get a traditional publisher and pursue that angle and see how that goes for me, I'm completely loath to start a new book or a new series when sequels for The Girl Who Would Be King and Story Killer are out there dangling unfinished. And especially The Girl Who Would Be King has a lot of readers who are like, what about that epilogue? Like, what does that mean? And I'm like, I'm sorry. There's another book locked inside my head, and I don't know if we'll ever get out there now. So,
would you ever be interested? I mean, since you're so in the world already, like doing like any Marvel novels, like even a Captain Marvel novel, or?
Yeah, I mean, low key, I was totally pissed when Marvel didn't let me write the Rogue novel that they did. I mean, like,
of course.
They barely knew me then. I mean, maybe they didn't know me at all when that was first being conceived. But I mean, I was like looking around at home fuming when I first read that was going to happen. And I'm like, wait a minute. I write comics. I write novels. I'm the biggest Rogue fan on earth. How am I not writing this book? So, I mean, there's interest there for me, but I'm more interested, unless the money was insanely good, which I suspect it's not insanely good, it may be just regular good. I'd be more interested in doing my own stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
But there's been comic book writers like Dennis O'Neil wrote a bunch of adaptations of the Batman movies for like novels after the movies came out. I don't know if Marvel has done that in the last few MCU ones, but that was also something that I was reading when I grew up around the 90s, collecting comic books too. So
doing the not the prose novelization of a movie.
Yeah. Would you ever would that be something that it would be cool to do on the table? It'd be weird to be writing Captain Marvel concurrently and tackle that.
I mean, I'm not totally against it, but I mean, I have to say, like, I think, and anyone who's done adaptation can speak to this, adaptation is really difficult. I think it's harder to go from prose to comics or films or TV. Well, maybe not TV, but because you have a lot less time than you do in a novel. So it's maybe a little easier to do something to prose that was in a different medium. I haven't ever tried it. I suspect because there's sort of, quote, as much room as you need, it's maybe a little easier, but it's just really hard. I mean, any writing is difficult, and when you have to add to it, a big part of that element is accepting that genres are different and what works in one doesn't work in another. It's tough. So yeah. I'm not that interested because the difficulty level seems hard with what I suspect is not that big a financial payoff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look at the adaptation of Watchmen. I mean, that was really too faithful to the comic. I feel like it was it didn't play to the strengths of the medium, versus the strengths of comics. So it was I mean, it was good, but
my big example of way too close to the comics, and it's way too close, is Sin City, which is
yes,
the aesthetic of that is so cool, and they have so many cool actors involved and everything. But I just want to know what an actual adaptation that's not so shot for shot. That has different priorities. I would have been really interested in that, and instead I'm like, nope, I don't want these. If I wanted this, I would just read the comic again, you know.
Yeah.
So,
so any, I know right now you're booked to the gills and not sleeping. So, but once that light from the end of the tunnel comes, any chance of dipping your toes into like the create your own stuff, maybe Image or?
Yes. I'm trying really hard to get... I have 2 creator-owned things with different teams that I'd sort of like to get out there at the same time, but the bandwidth is going to be tough on that, so it's maybe going to end up just being one of them. The one that's the furthest along, most likely, is a sort of YA thing called The Endless Girl. And it's with George, I'm going to butcher his last name, Combadius? I'm not sure. Who's sort of a really talented up-and-comer. He's got a very style that I think he loves superheroes, and he does an amazing stuff with superheroes in his style, but I don't think he's an easy sell to like Marvel and DC to like, oh, draw my book. So this, I think, will be an amazing fit for him. It was sort of his idea. We were talking about collaborating, and he had 2 ideas that he said, oh, maybe something like this or maybe something like this. And the second idea, which I called Endless Girl, I really had a good idea for how to expand. And so I sent him notes about it, and he loved it. And so we've basically been sitting on it for, almost 2 years, just because I haven't had time. It's 1.5 years or 2 years. And he's done a bunch of sketches here and there over that time, and every time he sends me one, I'm like, just want to stop everything and do this. But I just don't want to commit him to it until I know I can finish it and finish it on time, and that it'll be as good as we need it to be. So
cool.
But I mean, I think, and any creator of comics will tell you this, the creator-owned is a really important thing because, work for hire is sort of like your job, and creator-owned is hopefully like your 401k, right? Something that's paying you, and that maybe someone options it or whatever, and those are things that can maybe help you not die in poverty.
Which I think we can all agree would be a pretty good thing, right?
Yes, definitely. I mean, like, I feel very stressed all the time about this kind of stuff, and financially I took a lot of risks when I was trying to make the leap into comics, and so I accrued a lot of debt, and I'm basically like 6 months to a year off on my taxes, so I always have this trying to get out from under this stuff that I accrued. So even though I make decent money for a comic book creator right now, it never feels like enough because of that sort of weight I'm carrying. But I think that there's this pressure knowing that your career could your star can sort of fall at any time. Years ago, I helped spearhead when I was doing She Has No Head. We were trying to assemble a huge database of female comics creators. And when I started it for a lot of reasons. The first reason was because they were doing a great, back when Comics Should Be Good was sort of different than it is today, they were doing 100 best comic book writers and artists, and like 2 women were on the list. And so Brian Cronin and I decided to do a best women, and one of the first things I said was, I don't want to have to do a women only list. But I also don't believe only 2 women of all time belong on the 100 greatest artists and writers list. So that tells me we still need more exposure, in which case we're doing this 50 best, female comics writers and artists. And as part of that, we're also creating this database with all these names, and it's sort of a living document. So I'm starting it, but then I need you guys to help tell us who we missed, and let's fill it out and everything. And it was a great project, and I'm glad we did it, even though I wish it wasn't necessary. But I ended up finding it really depressing because the number of women that I saw that had like a really great book and then they like never did anything else was shocking to me. And it was a really great reminder that this can stop at any time. And so as a creator, you just really have to try and be smart and take care of yourself. I've been a little bit lucky because in addition to, having some good timing and things with books that I'm doing, I also do have novels that if everything dried up tomorrow, I could try to go back to that stuff and, hopefully work it out. But it's a very stressful way to live.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any final questions so we can let Kelly get her 20 minutes of sleep tonight?
Yeah, something nice so that we don't end on "I'm going to die in poverty."
Yes, exactly.
All right, here you go.
Take it up a notch. Sure.
Here you go. Lee and Kirby were on the FF for 102 issues. Are you gonna be on Carol for 102 issues?
God, I wish that existed today. I mean, it really doesn't exist. I mean, unless you're called Batman or Wolverine or maybe Spider-Man. I mean, it's just not a thing anymore, Mm-hmm. It bums me out. I'd love to say, oh yeah, I'm doing 5 years of Carol and that's it. Like, we're just doing it, But,
you might do 5 years. They might just renumber it.
Yeah.
I mean, it would probably definitely be renumbered. I mean, when you look at G. Willow Wilson's run on Ms. Marvel, even though she's got a couple renumbers, 50 issues, it seems crazy because it's so rare. I mean, I was bitching when to my friends, my writer friends, when Hawkeye got canceled, and I knew we were only getting to go to 16, and a couple of them go, 16's pretty good. And I was like, oh, it's so sad. It's so sad that that's how we think now. But, it's just like comics is tricky, man. It's a weird audience. Everyone's trying to figure out what's the best way to make it sustainable. And, you do what you can.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you already gave us like a few, but is there like any big tease you can give us about what's coming up in Captain Marvel? Maybe like anything cosmic, like the three of us love Quasar. Is there any cosmic stuff coming up?
Oh yeah, just sure. What do you like? What do you think about Wendell Vaughn, Quasar? Where is he? You seen him around the Marvel offices? Yeah. That's not my final question. I'm just adding to his.
I don't think love is probably quite a strong enough word for how we feel about that character.
Wow. I will let everyone know. No real plans for Quasar. I will say Quasar has been discussed when we've talked about Captain Marvel. There was a time when maybe that would have been a part of Arc 3, but we ended up going a different way. So no plans in Captain Marvel, but so this sort of apocalyptic Mad Maxian Carol arc goes through issue 5, and then we're going to have a 2-issue War of Realms tie-in that I'm really excited about, unless I screw it up. I think it has the potential to be super cool, and Black Widow will be a big player in that. Maybe also Sif will be involved in that, which I'm excited about.
Nice.
If we can get the right artist and I don't screw it up, it's going to be really cool. And I think a little unexpected. And then the arc after that, Arc 3, which starts with number 8, is a really big deal. It's going to be a lot of sort of significant development for Carol. It was actually what I pitched as our first arc. And for various reasons I can't discuss, it was decided it would work better as a third arc. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I fell so in love with the apocalyptic Mad Max stuff, I don't really care. So, I have a line on a new thing that I'll be writing that I can't talk about yet. It's not even decided yet, but it's very cool. One thing I could say about, there's a really interesting development coming up for this third arc of West Coast Avengers, which will create a really interesting new hero. I think Jessica Jones, which starts next week, is some of the best, most emotional and gutting comics I've ever written. I hope people are going to check it out. Madia is killing it. It looks so good, and it's so sad and just heart-wrenching. And then the arc, I guess it's arc 3, it'll be issues 11 and 12 of Mr. and Mrs. X, is going to be a sort of Thieves Guild thing, which I'm really excited to get into.
Nice. Kelly, you're like, oh, if I screw this up, they keep throwing books at you. I think you're doing fine.
I know, but the Carol one is a particularly difficult, sort of like got the difficulty level of a really good done-in-one. We'll have 2 issues, but it's really an idea. I mean, listen, everything's about execution, but sometimes it matters more than others, and that's a 2 issues where execution is going to sink or swim on it. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
All right. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Well, I guess can I just ask one little question, Kelly, about what you saw X-Men on TV. What was your first memory of getting like your very first comic, and what was the first like comic series that you liked to go back and collect?
So this is a good story, and it can tie into a rant about variant covers.
Oh yeah.
So my memory is it was like a couple weeks, but it could have been that week or a couple months. I can't be positive. After my brother and I have 2 brothers, but my brother Scott and I were the ones who were really into X-Men. My brothers came home from the mall yelling and jumping up and down. And my brother Scott, who loved the show so much, had a copy of Uncanny X-Men 290, which is Storm in the Rain. Mm-hmm. And he was like, look, it's the girl from the show. And I was like, what? And that was it. That became my first comic. I loved it. And I stole it from my brother years later. So it's in my garage, not his. And my brother David, who was younger and who wasn't as into this kind of thing, he had X-Force number 3. So that became my second comic. Rob Liefeld, apparently forever. So then that ties into the first time I got my mom to take us to the comic book store, because now I was in love with this thing and it was going to become my new obsession. X-Men Blue, regular X-Men, adjectiveless X-Men as we call it today, definitely became my super thing because Gambit and Rogue were my super faves. But I was also reading Uncanny X-Men because I wanted all the characters that I saw in the comic. So that became my first stuff. But so we went to the store and we picked out these comics. And I started sort of reading mine when I was in the mall, and then I had to put it away. And my brother had done the same. And then when we were in the car being driven home, I looked over at what he was reading, and I was like, that's mine. I was like, no. I'm not saying you can't read it, but I want to read it first. And he's like, this is the story I was reading. And I was like, but it can't be because it's a story I'm reading. And what was it? It was 2 different copies of X-Men number 1. Mine with Gambit and Rogue on the cover, and his with, Cyclops and
Magneto?
Cyclops, I think it was. And that was my introduction to variant covers.
Man.
F me to variant covers. Listen, as someone who loves artists and wants them to get a lot of work and loves a lot of variant covers, you guys saw that Adam Hughes Captain Marvel variant cover. It's amazing. So many of them are good. I love that David Nakayama one so much. So it's hard to hate on them, but I do think it's, the cash grab element is very frustrating. But most importantly, new readers are still getting screwed over by variant covers. And not just because they're not informed, like I wasn't when I was 15, but because if you go to the store, and even my boyfriend, who also went to school for sequential art and does not completely understands comics and how they work and has been reading them longer than I have. He's like, I go in and I look at the new release one and it's just like, I can't even see it. Like so many copies of Spider-Man, so many copies of this. They all have different covers, but they're all the same freaking thing. It's like, I feel like I go blind on it. And I was like, yeah, I agree. It's really confusing. I get it. I get that there's money there and comics needs all the money it can get, but it's really frustrating. And we talk all the time about how do we bring in readers and how do we make it easier for them. And we're slapping number 1s on all these things to try and make them accessible. But we just keep doing this variant cover thing. And it's pretty debilitating, I think.
All right, my question again. I was going to end this, but I mean, if your boyfriend's a big comic fan, does he brag that you're writing all these books? I know if my wife was writing all this stuff, I'd be like, "Hey guys, did you see my wife's new issue?"
He does sometimes brag. He has a couple great stories from going to shops and talking about me doing it. I would rather, instead of bragging, he would just read more of my comics.
You make him buy them.
Yeah, but the best story with him sort of talking about being a comics writer is when we were still living in New York. He went to Midtown Comics, which was a shop he went to quite a bit, and it must have been like whenever they were doing the promotion for Power Rangers Pink, which was a miniseries I did with Brennan Fletcher, and so it was probably in like the winter spring of 2016. So I was still pretty new. I'd only been really writing big comics for a year or so. And so he's in the shop and they had like a postcard with the Power Rangers Pink, like a promo card. And they had a stack of them at the desk. And Adam saw it and he was like, oh, and he was like talking to the guy and he's like, oh yeah, that's my girlfriend. And the guy sort of looked at him and was like, whatever, and then like kept ringing him up or whatever. And then at the end, he's like, oh, he goes, you mean the writer? And my boyfriend Adam, he goes, is that Amy Jo? He thought I was saying Amy Jo Johnson, the people. And the guy was like, yeah. And he was like, oh my God, that sounds pretty good. Just the writer, man.
All right. I think that's a good place to end. Like I said, Kelly Thompson.
Ended in the comic shop.
Yes. Everyone, great book, Captain Marvel #1. Great jumping on point. If you want to familiarize yourself with the, before the movie comes out, pick it up.
Variant cover.
Oh,
yes, get all the variant covers.
Great side cover. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me on so much.
Oh,
thanks for hanging out.
Again, I mean, I've talked to you a couple times. Thank you for making time for us all the time.
Absolutely. Take care, you guys. Have a good week.
You too.
Get some sleep.
Get some sleep.
Bye, Kelly.
Bye.
Yeah, as I told you guys before, she's great. They always say that, I'm always afraid. I'm like, oh, please don't let this person be a jerk. But like most of the comic creators I've talked to, really nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like the newer people, I mean, they were fans just like us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But great double team, Matt. We were like, hey, Quasar? Any Quasar?
That's crazy that he was talked about. We were almost. It's in the mix.
I think we need to get him in the MCU. That'll be the big push they need for a new book. Yeah,
exactly.
Because if you aren't listening to the Capes and Lunatics sidekicks, you can check out the Quantum Zone every Friday, or here on YouTube.
Subscribe.
All right, gentlemen, let's get out of here. All right, everyone. What did you think? Any comic creators? Come on and pimp your books. Email capesandlunatics@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter @CapesLunatics. We're on Instagram and the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And Will, you created a book of your own. What is that?
That is Diary of Night from Kickstarter, actually. So it's available at diaryofnight.com. And if you want to chat with me, you can find me at WALLRED, Twitter, Facebook, Gmail, blah, blah, blah. Or willallred.com, too. So.
And Matt Kona, you're a big presence on YouTube. Where is that?
Oh, I've got a YouTube page, and I have two, in fact. One is on my stand-up comedy on it, and another is a podcast I do with my wife that is also a stand-up comic. You can subscribe to both or either one. Yale and Matt Recap, YAEL, and Matt Recap, spelled like you would. And yeah, so we just talk about movies or TV shows or some things, and that's a lot of fun. I hope.
If you're looking to hire a stand-up or somebody to fight with a homeless person, Matt Cona's your man. All right, everyone. We're at Carol Danvers, and we're like, okay, is the Captain Marvel miniseries over? No. Come back next month for one last episode. I had to agree. Lilith Hellfire and I are going to talk Shazam.
Okay, awesome.
Also had a movie coming out.
Yeah, that's right. Like the month after, yeah. Wow. But also, it used to be known as Captain Marvel, so.
Yeah, copyright. You got to do all the copyright issue podcast? Talk about law.
All right, we should list Kelly's books on show notes.
Yes,
books he's writing and everything.
Yes, I was gonna say I'll stay up all night and just list the one she's writing right now.
Exactly. You might be done by morning. She's the busiest writer in comics.
That's what I said, man.
Yeah.
And she's handling some iconic stuff. I mean, X-Men, Hawkeye, even Nancy Drew, Ghostbusters, Star Wars, like stuff she's done. It's crazy.
But yeah, thank you again, Kelly. And come back next month.